In 2019, YouTube was caught violating the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. Since settling, YouTube has enacted new policies that are meant to serve as a smokescreen so they can dodge responsibility and scapegoat creators. As such, for my own protection, it is my obligation to advise you that this video is not aimed at children. My target audience is not children. Parental discretion is advised. My name is the Sentinel, and I bring you stories. Stories about a mysterious, quaint little town at the edge of the world. A town overlooked by a house at the top of the hill, and the dark shadows that inhabit it. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and welcome back to another Sentinel Vlogs. As you can see, I'm doing something very different, and it ties into what I'm going to be covering next on Sentinel Reviews. I announced it on Twitter, and I forgot to announce it in a video, because at the time of my last video, I hadn't decided to review it yet. But while sticking in Big Finish, I'll be going into something different and reviewing Dark Shadows, the horror collection. And so I thought, while doing that, I would take this time to discuss what I think are great Dark Shadows audios for beginners. I love Dark Shadows, and I love the Dark Shadows audios, and it's really a shame because no one really seems to be talking about them. So I thought I would try to get out some more of them to talk about, and try to spread the word and get more people interested in them. Now, hopefully, if I don't go on any of my ramblings or tangents, this will be a very short video for two reasons. One, I am still relatively new to the Dark Shadows audios, so there is still a lot at this point I haven't heard. And two, what was number two? Number two was that there is sadly not a lot of great jumping on points if you're new to Dark Shadows. Just by its nature, with the Doctor Who audios, if you know the basic premise of the show and you know the core mythos, you could, for the most part, pick any audio and jump right in. Dark Shadows is not the same way. Unfortunately, Dark Shadows is extremely narrative driven. So, each story is in some way a sequel to old storylines, or old storylines are brought up or referenced, or, a storyline may be a catalyst for something that's happening now. And that is just how Dark Shadows operates. So, I'm only going to be talking about 4 audios, like I said, and I'm going to have them ranked in order of accessibility, from the least accessible, the one I think you need the most knowledge of the show and its storylines to be able to jump into, to the most accessible, the one that you really need the least foreknowledge of the show to be able to get into. And without further ado, let's just jump right in. And kicking off our list of recommendations is number 4, Angelique's Descent, Part 1, Innocence, and Part 2, Betrayal. Now this one is an audiobook adaptation of the novel of the same name written by Lara Parker, Angelique's actress. And Parker wrote 4 novels, based around the show: Angelique's Descent, The Salem Branch, Wolf Moon Rising, which all comprise a little trilogy, and Heiress of Collinwood. And Big Finish's adaptation is an abridged adaptation. It's also, compared to the full audiobook reading, it's also fully dramatized with music and sound design. And another actor, whose name I am forgetting, playing another part, the part of the Dark Lord. For those of you familiar with the show, actually, of Parker's novels, Angelique's Descent is the most famous one, I believe. Don't know if I'd call it the best, but it is certainly the most famous, and its story is very simple. It is Angelique's backstory. It is how she became who she is in the series. Now, Big Finish's adaptation is very abridged. There's multiple storylines going on in the novel, one of which includes Barnabas in the present day, and that's how the narrative is presented. It's Barnabas reading Angelique's diary. And there's this whole plot line that goes on in the present day that also continues in Parker's later two books, The Salem Branch and Wolf Moon Rising. Big Finish decided not to continue that storyline or incorporate it into their audios in any way, so this audiobook retelling is merely all of Angelique's backstory. It's all her childhood growing up and ends right at the point where she curses Barnabas to be a vampire. And personally, I think I like this version more. I still haven't heard the full unabridged audiobook reading, but I think I like the Big Finish version more. Again, because it's more dramatized, with sound design and music. And, I think it's perfect for beginners who are familiar with the show. Now, as I said, these are ranked based on accessibility. Accessibility by being how easy it is to get or how much of the prior series and storylines the story I'm talking about relies on. Which, again, because it's her backstory and sort of ends covering events of the show, Angelique's Descent is a great beginning place to start. But the accessibility thing, and that's why this is number 4. As of right now, Big Finish's audiobook of Angelique's Descent is strictly CD only. There is no download for it at the time being. Hopefully that'll get fixed very soon. I heard somewhere, I think it was in one of the podcasts, that right now Big Finish is working on converting the early Bernice Summerfield adventures into download as well, because they're CD only. So I have to imagine at some point in the future they'll do the same for Angelique's Descent as well, because they're fighting it as much as possible, but they're slowly going towards download only. But yeah, if you have a little bit of knowledge of the show, if you're familiar with Angelique Bouchard, or heck, even if you like Angelique Bouchard, she's one of my top 5 favorite characters, I really recommend Angelique's Descent. Number 3, Bloodlust. This, I believe, was the third of Big Finish's mini-series, so to speak. They have single releases, which they call audiobooks. The next 2 are from the audiobook range, so I'll talk about that a little more there. But every so often, Big Finish would do a miniseries, which was full cast and, sort of continued the story from the ending of the show. Although all the audios do that, so that's not really a thing. Anyway, so the first one was done as single releases, and just based on the trailers I've seen for it, like if you have the DVDs, like I do, at the end of every DVD, they have the Big Finish visual trailer for this first miniseries. I'm calling it A Legend Reborn, and then was Kingdom of the Dead. Excuse me. And then was Bloodlust. And then there was Bloodline, and then Wyncliffe, which has been delayed until 2021 right now. But anyway, Bloodlust is the one everyone says if you're new to Dark Shadows, you should start with. It's pretty much a fresh start for the Dark Shadows series, and it's a great jumping on point. And I'm putting it at number 3 because having listened to Bloodlust, and I do enjoy it quite a lot, I kind of disagree. I don't think it's the clean slate everyone says it is. Like, for the new characters, certainly, for the introduction of the new characters, but for the returning characters, Maggie, Barnabas, Quentin, they bring a lot of their baggage, and they do bring some old storylines with them. Especially one of the MacGuffins that gets brought up in the story. But I do think Bloodlust is a good enough starting point. I just don't agree with everyone else that it's the blank slate everyone says it is. Number 2, The Night Whispers. Now, This one is kind of interesting because this is the only audio that Jonathan Frid did. Jonathan Frid was the actor who played Barnabas Collins. And after playing the role for so long, he eventually grew to resent it, because it was the only thing he was recognized for. And so when Big Finish started doing Dark Shadows audios, they approached him. He said no, but he gave Big Finish his blessing to recast the part. And then he did the Night Whispers. Now, first of all, real quick, this is one of their audiobook releases that I was talking about. They're single releases, so to speak. These are just little hour-long releases telling a short story in some way. And what was I going to say? I think audiobook is kind of a misnomer. Some of them very much are. It's a character recounting a story, sort of like number one, which I'll talk about in a moment. But a lot of them are full cast and don't really follow the audiobook format. It's kind of like the companion chronicles from the Doctor Who range, but at the same time, they're also not. It's weird, and basically everything that's not a miniseries is released under the audiobook range. That's all I'm getting at. And as I was saying, this is the only audio Jonathan Frid did. So if you like Barnabas and you're interested to hear it, I do recommend this one. It's very introspective, though. Basically, years after the end of the series, I'm assuming just prior to Return to Collinwood, an anniversary audio that Big Finish had no part in, a now cured, a now human Barnabas Collins is reflecting on his past with Willie Loomis late one night. And what happens is a ghost from his past has unfinished business with him, which she is seeking to resolve. Now, another little fun tidbit of information about this audio is that ghost is played by Barbara Eden, who, in the short-lived revival of Dark Shadows, Barbara Eden played Julia Hoffman. I do recommend seeking out the revival if you're interested. Joseph Gordon-Levitt played David. Anyway, the Night Whispers, again, is very isolated, very contained. It kind of calls on past plot points, but not to the point that you need to know about them, just in that Barnabas is remembering them. And number one, what I think is the best starting point if you're new to Dark Shadows: The House by the Sea. This story is written by James Goss, and this one is so perfect if you're a beginner into Dark Shadows. If you're only familiar with the show, if you're not familiar with it whatsoever, it is a perfect starting point, because this series follows a new original character played by Colin Baker as he decides to move to Collinsport, and he rents out a part of the property of Collinwood called the House by the Sea. What makes the House by the Sea such a good starting point is it's from the point of view of an outsider looking in, So there's all these characters he interacts with: Barnabas, Elizabeth, Julia, Carolyn. And if you know who they are, that's great. But if you don't, the story doesn't hinge on you knowing them, It's sort of a fun little nod, and it creates this kind of mystery to who these people are. The story is also really tense, and there's this great horror to it. And it works as that sort of audiobook, because Colin Baker is playing this very neurotic character who's trying to relax and, get away from it all. And what he's doing is he's tape recording his experiences. So he's recording himself on a tape talking about these interactions he had with these characters. And Baker is very lively in this role, and he plays it so well, and the ending is just spine tingling. I'm gonna be honest, along with being a really brilliant jumping on point for Dark Shadows, if you're new or not, The House by the Sea is also currently my favorite Dark Shadows audio. Maybe. It's tied with Bloodline, but I really like this one. And whether you're new or not, if you haven't heard The House by the Sea, I wholeheartedly recommend it. And there you have it. My recommendations if you're new to Big Finish's Dark Shadows audio. What did you think? Have you heard any of the Dark Shadows audios? What do you think is a good starting point for newbies to this range? Start a conversation in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. In the description box below, you'll find the link to my Ko-fi, where you can help support the channel, and you'll find the link to my Twitter, where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. Also included will be the links to Big Finish's website, where you can buy each of these titles. This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and I'll see you guys next time with my review of the first story in the horror collection, Final Judgment.